Hello, everyone. News sources across the board and across the world are covering the meeting that took place in the UK over the weekend, um, in which UK's Prime Minister Starmer referred to this point in time as a crossroads in history. The group of participating nations is now being referred to as the Coalition of the Willing. If this sounds familiar, it's because the same term has been applied to the nations that joined the US after 9/11, attempting to retaliate against Al Qaeda. Incidentally, and that is a reminder to Americans, back then, if you don't remember, NATO, I think it's Article 3 was invoked. That's the one where if one of the NATO members gets attacked, all of them have to respond. And 18 nations joined the United States in response. And while Ukraine was not a NATO member, it was a NATO ally even then. And it provided soldiers and weapons to join the US at the time. For some reason, nobody seems to remember that. If you don't believe me, look it up. 9/11, Coalition of the Willing, Ukraine would be a good place to start. So Trump and Vance berated Zelensky for not saying thank you, even though he did many times. Have they thanked Ukraine lately for what it has done for them? For what it has done for the US at its time of need? Anyway, the crossroads in history is not the first time that's something like that happens. We've seen this throughout the history of the world when it's time to pick sides. Of course, the most prominent such milestone was during World War II, where once again the US was late to the party. Because, as much as I respect FDR, he too felt that this has nothing to do with us until Japan, emboldened by Hitler's successes in Europe, attacked the US. And then suddenly, it had everything to do with you. Right now, the major players in the Coalition of the Willing are the UK, France, Germany, and of course, Ukraine, which is, again, encouraging since, you cannot have this discussion without Ukraine. You hear that, Trump? The plan includes keeping the aid flowing, keeping economic pressure on Russia, meaning keeping the sanctions, expanding the sanctions, and making sure that Ukraine participates in any and all peace talks that concern its future. Now, while I approve of everybody's attempts to pull together an actual plan, which is, it's great. To hear some specifics is fantastic. My concern is what happens when this plan is presented to the US. Now, here's something I disagree with. Keir Starmer said that he trusts that Donald Trump truly wants peace in Ukraine. And I have to disagree with him. Donald Trump doesn't give a hoot about Ukraine. Donald Trump doesn't give a hoot about a single life lost in Ukraine. What he wants is a feather in his cap. He wants to be able to claim that he ended the war in Ukraine at whatever cost. He wants that credit. And it actually might be better if this took place without him, if he can take absolutely zero credit. He will anyhow, because that's what he does. Because even if it's the European nations and Ukraine that drive Russia back, Trump will say, well, the only reason you were able to do that is because Russia is scared of me. But my point is, no, this is not a man to trust. He doesn't want peace. He wants credit. He wants clout. He wants prestige. And this is another thing. Zelensky says he's willing to restore dialogue with Trump. Why? I mean, yeah, I get that you're willing, but you know that's not going to happen because he wants an apology. And you should not apologize because you have done nothing wrong. So I don't see how that is realistic. Once again, at this time, I think we just write the U.S. off as a loss. Because it is. The rest of the U.S. government, who is willing to listen, should be interested in the deal that they're trying to work out because, as Francis Macron pointed out, it does include a portion of the profits from Ukraine's mineral mining for the U.S. So they should be interested in that. But again, the question to the U.S. Congress is how you want to do this. Because you know this is not going to happen while Trump is in charge. This is not going to happen while that particular maniac is running things. So you have to decide what you want to do and how you want the U.S. as a country positioned in this deal. Another monitoring mission from the UN nuclear watchdog came to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. If you recall, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has been under Russian control for 3 years now, roughly. And it is an ongoing concern, even though it has been upgraded extensively before the war to put into place safeguards, new equipment, and safety protocols to avoid a Chernobyl-like disaster. Since it has been under Russian control, there is no telling what corners have been cut, whether these security protocols have been observed, what the maintenance has been like, etc., etc. So, once again, my question to the UN is, what are you going to do about it? We know Russia doesn't care if you express concern. We know Russia doesn't care if you come out and make a public statement saying, yes, there are violations. This thing is the biggest nuclear power station in Europe, and if it goes, we go. So my question to them is specifically, what do you want to do? Because the time for concern is over. And then there is this, again, for all of Russia's declarations of wanting peace, they continue showering Ukrainian cities with ballistic missiles, drones, and glide bombs. There were strikes in the Odessa region where 1 person died and 3 people were injured. Now remember, Odessa is an important port through which Ukrainian grain flows out into the world. And then there were additional attacks damaging the infrastructure and a vessel that belongs to a European country. And of course, Moscow is once again boasting about taking more of Ukrainian territory. The information could not be confirmed by any other source. More to come.